The night my ex-wife laughed in my face and said, "No one loves you." I was standing in a half-empty apartment with a toddler asleep on my shoulder and $57 in my bank account. Her words didn't echo because the room was bare. They echoed because a part of me was afraid she was right. I remember staring at the peeling paint on the wall, trying to swallow the lump in my throat, promising myself that my son would never hear those words from anyone, not even from me. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of single parents, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the people who say we are unlovable are simply blind to the love we carry. My name is Daniel Harper, and 3 years ago I was a 34-year-old single dad who could barely keep his life together. My ex-wife, Marissa, left when our son Ethan was barely 1. She said she was tired of struggling, tired of my small dreams, tired of coming home to a man who smelled like engine oil and exhaustion. I worked as a mechanic in a local garage, fixing other people's broken vehicles, while my own life was quietly falling apart. When she walked out, she didn't just take her clothes and her designer handbags, she took every ounce of confidence I had left. The divorce was ugly. Marissa came from money, and her family made sure I felt that difference at every court hearing. They painted me as incapable, unstable, too busy to raise a child. But Ethan chose me in the only way a baby can choose, by clinging to my shirt and crying when someone else tried to take him from my arms. In the end, I was granted primary custody. Marissa moved to another state with a wealthy entrepreneur she had started dating before our marriage officially ended. She posted glossy photos online of yacht parties and champagne dinners, and occasionally she sent messages reminding me how lucky I was that she had freed me from her expectations. Being a single father is not a heroic montage with uplifting music. It is waking up at 4 a.m. to prepare bottles before a 10-hour shift. It is memorizing the exact temperature of milk your child prefers. It is learning how to braid hair from YouTube tutorials when your son insists on playing with the neighbor girl's ribbons. It is falling asleep sitting upright, because if you lie down, you might not wake up when he cries. Some nights, after Ethan was asleep, I would scroll through my phone and see Marissa's vacations in Monaco or Dubai. I would hear her voice in my head, repeating that cruel sentence, "No one loves you." Money was tight. There were months when rent swallowed nearly everything I earned. I sold my old guitar, the one I had played in college bands, to pay for Ethan's daycare deposit. I stopped buying new clothes. My wardrobe became a rotation of faded jeans and 2 work shirts. When Ethan got sick one winter with pneumonia, I spent 3 nights on a plastic hospital chair, watching the steady rise and fall of his tiny chest under the harsh fluorescent lights. In that sterile room, I realized something important. Love is not measured by who posts the most glamorous photos. It is measured by who stays when everything hurts. Still, loneliness is a quiet predator. It creeps in when your child falls asleep and the house goes silent. It whispers that you are failing, that you are invisible. On Ethan's 3rd birthday, I threw a small party at the park. Only 3 children showed up. I had baked the cake myself, lopsided and slightly burned at the edges. As Ethan laughed, smearing blue frosting across his cheeks, I noticed a woman sitting on a nearby bench watching us. She wasn't dressed like the other parents. No flashy logos, no oversized sunglasses, just a simple white blouse and jeans, her dark hair pulled back neatly. She was smiling at Ethan with an expression that felt warm, almost nostalgic. Later, as I was packing up, Ethan ran toward her, offering a piece of cake on a napkin. I apologized, embarrassed, but she knelt down and accepted it with genuine gratitude. That was how I met Victoria Hale. At the time, I had no idea who she really was. To me, she was just a kind stranger who thanked my son as if he had handed her a priceless gift. We started seeing each other at the park occasionally. She told me she liked to walk there after long workdays because it reminded her of simpler times. She asked about Ethan's favorite cartoons, about my work at the garage, about the challenges of raising a child alone. There was no pity in her eyes, only curiosity and respect. One afternoon, as Ethan chased pigeons across the grass, she admitted that she admired single parents. She said they carried the weight of 2 hearts and still found room to smile. It wasn't until months later that I learned Victoria was the CEO of Hale Industries, a global tech and infrastructure conglomerate worth billions. I almost laughed when I first saw her face on a business magazine cover at the grocery store checkout line. The headline called her the youngest self-made billionaire in the country. My first instinct was to step back from her life. I was a mechanic with grease-stained hands. She owned skyscrapers. But Victoria never made me feel small. When she visited the garage, she asked about carburetors and engine diagnostics as if they were fascinating mysteries. She brought coffee for the entire team, not just for me. When Ethan fell and scraped his knee one evening at the park, she was the one who cleaned it gently, whispering that scars were proof of bravery. Slowly, almost without noticing, the emptiness inside me began to shrink. Marissa, of course, noticed too. She had started following my social media again, perhaps out of boredom or curiosity. One evening she called, her voice dripping with disbelief. She asked if it was true that I was seeing someone important. I could almost hear the smirk behind her words. She reminded me of my place, of how I could barely afford rent. She repeated that no woman of real value would ever choose a man like me. But life has a strange sense of timing. A week later, Victoria invited Ethan and me to a charity gala hosted by her company. I resisted at first. The idea of stepping into a ballroom filled with tuxedos and diamond necklaces felt absurd. Yet Victoria insisted that she didn't want a polished accessory, she wanted us. So I rented a simple suit, held Ethan's small hand, and walked into a world I had only seen in movies. The chandeliers glittered like frozen stars. A string quartet played softly in the corner. And there, at the center of it all, stood Victoria, radiant and calm. When she saw Ethan tugging nervously at his tiny bow tie, she knelt to fix it, ignoring the cameras flashing around her. In that moment, I understood something profound. Wealth did not define her. Kindness did. Whispers traveled quickly through the crowd. People stared, trying to piece together how a mechanic and a billionaire could stand side by side so naturally. But Victoria never flinched. She introduced me as Daniel, the most dedicated father she had ever met. She spoke about Ethan as if he were her own family. I felt years of humiliation melt away under the warmth of her pride. Over time, our bond deepened. Victoria shared stories of her own lonely childhood, of building an empire while sacrificing personal connections. I shared my fears of not being enough, of failing Ethan. We were two broken people who had learned to survive in different worlds. Together, we found balance. She taught me that ambition did not have to erase compassion. I reminded her that success meant little without someone to come home to. The day I proposed was not extravagant. There were no fireworks or televised announcements. It was just the three of us at the same park where we first met. Ethan helped me hold the ring, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Victoria said yes, with tears streaming down her face. Not because of the diamond, but because of the promise of a family. News of our engagement spread like wildfire. Headlines framed it as a fairy tale, a rags-to-riches romance. Marissa called again, her voice no longer mocking but sharp with disbelief. She asked how I had managed to trap someone like Victoria. I didn't respond with anger. I simply told her that love is not a trap, it is a choice, and someone had chosen me. Our wedding was elegant yet intimate. Victoria insisted on keeping it small, inviting only those who truly mattered. Ethan walked her down the aisle alongside me, holding both our hands. As we exchanged vows, I thought back to that empty apartment and those crushing words, "No one loves you." They felt distant now, like echoes from a different lifetime. Marriage to a billionaire did not magically erase every challenge. There were tabloids, public scrutiny, business pressures. But through it all, Victoria remained grounded. She created a foundation to support single parents pursuing education and career training. She asked me to help lead it, saying my experiences gave me insight no boardroom ever could. For the first time, my struggles became a source of strength rather than shame. Ethan flourished under her gentle guidance. He began calling her mom one quiet evening after she helped him build a model rocket for school. I watched from the doorway, my heart nearly bursting. Love had entered our lives not with a grand announcement, but with steady, patient presence. If this story is touching your heart, if you have ever been told you are not enough, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who may desperately need hope. And before we reach the end, I have a special request. Comment below with the words, "I am enough," if you believe that no one gets to define your worth. Years later, I ran into Marissa at a charity event hosted by our foundation. Time had softened her edges. The entrepreneur she once chased had moved on. She looked at Victoria, then at me, and something like regret flickered in her eyes. But I felt no triumph, only gratitude. Because without her leaving, I might never have discovered the depth of my own resilience. That night, as Victoria and I drove home, Ethan asleep in the back seat, she squeezed my hand and whispered that meeting us had been the greatest fortune of her life. I looked at the city skyline glowing in the distance, buildings her company had helped design, and realized that true wealth was sitting right beside me. The boy who once slept in a half-empty apartment now drifted peacefully between two parents who adored him. The mechanic who was told he was unlovable had become a husband, a partner, a co-founder of hope for others. And the billionaire who once felt alone at the top of the world had found laughter in bedtime stories and pancake mornings. Life did not change because I married wealth. It changed because someone saw value in my scars instead of my salary. It changed because I refused to let cruel words become permanent truths. When Marissa said no one loved me, she was measuring love by status and comfort. She didn't understand that love grows strongest in hardship, that it takes root in sacrifice and blossoms in loyalty. As I tuck Ethan into bed each night, I sometimes think about the version of myself who stood in that empty apartment. I wish I could reach back through time and tell him to hold on, to ignore the laughter, to trust that kindness has a way of finding those who keep their hearts open. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that your current struggle does not define your final chapter, please engage with this video and share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Because somewhere out there is a father, a mother, a dreamer standing in their own empty room, believing they are unlovable. And maybe, just maybe, they need to hear that the right person will see their worth. In the end, I didn't marry a billionaire. I married a woman who believed in me when I barely believed in myself. And that belief turned out to be the greatest fortune of all.